Shelian turned his head to look at that dejected-looking, kneeling statue, and said, Qirong was right about one thing. I am quite the failure. Don't believe in the words of useless trash like him, Hua Chang said gently. Other than being good at not dying and running away, he's got nothing else going for him. He can't even level up to a supreme after 800 years. Even beating him up would only dirty your hands. Shelian's lips jerked upward, thinking, wasn't he also the same? Only good at not dying and running away. Even after 800 years, he'd only gotten as far himself, which was nowhere. At first, when he saw Lang Chen Chou as the martial god of the East, ranking as a high heavenly official, but still maintaining his old character, still straightforward, still falling asleep in boring meetings, he felt rather comforted. And yet, from now on, who knows how he would change? He went in pursuit of Qirong. Once that was done, how would he end things with Shelian? Shelian stood up and slowly walked to the statue. He stood in front of it, head on. That face was indeed exactly the same as his own, only it was carved with a sorrowful expression, its face covered in tears, scrunched up and ugly. After staring at it for a moment, Shelian sighed and placed his hand on its head, pouring in a powerful force of energy. When he removed his hand, 2 long crevices crawled over the cheeks of the statue, and soon after, the crying face broke apart. The statue collapsed and crumbled into small rocks, falling to the ground, never to be restored. When Shelian turned around again, his usual gentle and peaceful expression was back on his face. He rubbed his forehead and said, Qirong's lair probably still has a lot of humans hidden. I'll go find them and release them. Hua Chang stood up too. Let's go. During the ruckus earlier, all the little green lantern ghosts in Qirong's lair had run away, and those who didn't were hidden in the shadows, afraid to come out. The two searched all over, nabbing a couple of unfortunate little ghosts along the way, and forcing them to lead, and they found many caves used for storing fresh food. Counting roughly, the number of people that Qirong had captured for consumption was actually no less than 300. They were either nearby villagers or travelers passing by. The two unlocked jail cells as they roamed, freeing all the detainees. With the task at hand, Shelian was able to change focus and calm down. Now that they were free, he had the time to chat with Hua Chang. He pondered at his words, but asked anyway. By the way, San Lang, I wanted to ask you about something. What is it? Hua Chang asked. How did you know that Qirong was the mastermind behind the gilded banquet plot? Shelian asked. At first he didn't know why Hua Chang had brought himself and Lang Chen Chou to the Green Ghost's lair. But now he did. Hua Chang's objective was to have Lang Chen Chou hear for himself Qirong's confession to the whole gilded banquet scheme. Qirong didn't know that I was Fang Xin, Shelian said. If he had known, he would have harassed me from the start. At the time, although I knew that the old Shanle royals were plotting something underhanded, I didn't know that it was Qirong behind it all. So how did you find out? How long have you known this? Not too long. Hua Chang walked alongside him with his hands behind his back. I've run into Qirong a few times and learned about the kind of person that he is. Qirong was of Shanle when he was alive and regarded Yong'an with deep hatred. He was good at the art of provocation, fanning fires and fabricating situations. Many of the major assassination plots of the Yong'an nobles were all manipulated by him behind the shadows, but he hid really well. Shelian shook his head. So he already had a history. Good thing he's good at hiding. If the heavens found out that he had a hand in all those mortal conflicts, they would not show him any mercy. Spilling blood at the gilded banquet was very much his style, Huachang said. So I had always believed that the mastermind was him, and that the Guoshe Fangxin was his lackey. But in the upper court, since Lang Chenchou identified you as the Guoshe Fangxin, then there was no way that Fangxin and Qi Rong would be in the same boat. Xue Lian's steps slowed. It seemed that even though Huachang wasn't present in the heavens, he was still very much informed of what went on in the great martial hall. And not only that, he was also very knowledgeable of Xue Lian's personal relationship with Qi Rong. Huachang continued, Nevertheless, I still leaned toward Qi Rong as the mastermind, or at least the one who started the whole thing. After Lang Chenchou's father had ascended the throne, the remnant citizens of Shanle had received many improvements to their lives, and no longer thought of avenging their fallen kingdom. The only ones who couldn't let go would be the royal family of Shanle. At the time, the only remaining descendant was Prince An Le. If Qi Rong wanted to instigate anyone into starting anything, it would have been him. Very conveniently, this individual randomly died of an unknown illness right after the gilded banquet. Was that not obviously suspect? Xue Lian nodded and Huachang concluded. So he was more than likely killed, and the reason for his death had something to do with the gilded banquet. My first deduction was that it was the work of young An nobility, but nothing happened to the remnant citizens of Shanle, so it couldn't have been them. I thought about it and came to my present conclusion. Xue Lian smiled and was amazed. So few clues, and yet you could deduce so accurately. It's not hard, Huachang said. You just have to know the main people involved well. That's for sure, but in your deduction, there was a significant preamble that I don't understand. And that is, Huachang asked, why do you believe so firmly that the one who made the first move must be Qi Rong? It wasn't that I believed that he did it. I just believed that you didn't. Hearing this, Xue Lian stopped smiling. He was quiet for a moment before asking, why is that? If you had admitted to spilling blood at the gilded banquet using any other reason, then I would have believed it was you, Huachang replied. The Yong'an king was sincere in his rule, loved by the people, and yet Lang Chenchou said that the reason you gave him was, I couldn't stand seeing you in that position. That was the model declaration of one overthrowing the crown. But if those words came from you, then it'd be a poor attempt at tarnishing your own name. Hearing this, Xue Lian puffed a laugh soundlessly. Tarnishing my own name? Did you not think that maybe I harbored those thoughts deep down inside? Maybe I do have some hidden resentment. Thoughts are thoughts. You wouldn't have acted upon them, Huachang said. Xue Lian shut his mouth. After a moment, he said, San Lang, I'm not the person you think I am. You... Xue Lian closed his eyes and shook his head, as if undecided on whether to comment. Huachang urged, What? Tell me. It won't matter. Xue Lian chewed on his words, but finally said, I just think it's best for people not to have too much hope in another. Oh, Huachang hummed. And what do you mean by that? Don't think someone to be overly perfect, Xue Lian replied. If it's just watching a shadow from afar and never having to interact, then whatever. But once acquainted and grown close, one day you'll end up finding that this person was not what you imagined, maybe even the complete opposite. When that happens, then you'll be very disappointed. Huachang disagreed. You never know. I don't care if anyone else is disappointed. But to some, the very existence of a certain person in this world is in itself hope. Although he didn't specify who some were and who a certain person was, His tone plain and casual, like it was an offhand comment. Shirlian's heart lifted. He even felt light. He paused in his step and couldn't speak. Some moments after, he suddenly blurted out, "San Lang, who are you really?" Hua Chang stopped too and turned his head to look at him. Shirlian looked him squarely in his eyes and asked thoughtfully, "You knew who Qirong was and knew the kind of person he is. You knew who I am and knew how to paint the God-pleasing crown prince. You seem to know everything about me. You know a lot, maybe even more." Hua Chang raised his eyes. "Don't I always know a lot?" Shirlian shook his head. "It's not the same." His left hand held his right elbow, while his right hand propped up his chin. He looked at Hua Chang in wonder. "I've always had the feeling that you are someone from my past and must have known me from early on. Maybe it was during my first ascension. No, maybe even earlier. Yet, I really don't remember. When have I ever met a character like you?" Someone like Hua Chang would be unforgettable after the first meeting. Shilin had never bashed his head in and lost his memories, so if they had met, there was no reason he wouldn't remember. Shilin stared at him, looking somewhat bemused. "Who are you exactly? Have I met you before?" Hua Chang didn't answer, but his lips lifted softly. Shilin immediately came to and realized that his questions were extremely inappropriate. A ghost's real name was usually a secret. Unless it's someone unfathomably abnormal like Qirong, there was no reason to tell it to anyone. Shilin hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, don't mind me. I was just asking. You don't have to answer me. Whoever you are doesn't matter." Just then, Hua Chang's eyes squinted. Shilin realized he must have noticed something and turned his head back. Behind them, from not far within the cave, came noisy chatter and the clear, loud voice of a woman. "I told you, my powers are stronger in my female form. Even my luck is better. Yet, you still wouldn't let me. Do you see now? We rolled it right this time." It was Shi Qingshuan's voice. Shilin blurted out, "Lord Windmaster." As he had guessed, a white-clad lady cultivator came sprinting out of a cave opening, and her eyes lit up when she saw Shilin. "I found him. His Highness is here." However, she then saw Hua Chang standing behind Shilin, and her face fell immediately. She leapt backward and flashed the Windmaster fan before her. Before Shilin had the chance to say anything, another voice of a man echoed from within the cave. "Did you find him? How are things?" His voice was coming closer, and soon the shadow of another appeared. It was Feng Xin. He had in his left hand a long black bow, and the moment he saw Hua Chang, he pulled back the silver bowstring on high alert. Hua Chang chuckled and made no comment. Shilin hurriedly said, "Put away your weapons. We can talk this out." The four ran into each other on the narrow path of the green ghost's lair, 2 against 2. Feng Xin had the bowstring pulled fully. A string of spiritual light formed into the shape of an arrow within his right hand, and he aimed it at Hua Chang. Feng Xin spoke first, his voice full of warning. "Your Highness, come here." Feng Xin's bow was gifted by Jun Wu and named Feng Xin. It was a rather troublesome spiritual device. Shilin was afraid that he'd shoot for real and rushed to stand in front of Hua Chang, shielding him. But unexpectedly, Hua Chang grabbed him from behind and pulled him right back. That pull startled the other two. Shi Qingshuan immediately raised her hand. "Hua Chang, Crimson Rain Sword Flower, don't do anything rash. The burning of your Paradise Manor was an accident. If you're displeased, we can talk. The heavens can pay you back. His Majesty the Martial Emperor isn't that short on money. Let go of His Highness and let's talk.